Hey and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be walking through one of my own recipes. This is of a Weissbier, similar to that of like a German or Munich wheat beer. This is a style that I really like after living in Munich for a year or so. I really started to enjoy the wheat beers that they have for sale there. It's a prominent beer style in Germany, you see it everywhere, and it's really delicious. So rather than using the kit this time, so if you've seen any of my other videos, you'll know that I've used Brooklyn Brew Shop kits in the past to get going with this. Instead today, I'm going to be doing this by myself. So I've ordered the malts and the hops myself online. And this is a recipe that I found while searching around on the internet. And I've basically tweaked it a little bit to make it more like the German Bavarian wheat beer style that I enjoy. So this is a little bit of a progression on those Brooklyn Brew Shop kits. This is sort of going down your own path, and this is where you can start really experimenting with beers. Now we've got the process locked from using those kits, it's time to now advance on to doing some more things by yourself. So this video is for anyone who's looking to do that, or is just really interested in brewing a really good Weissbier, because this turned out absolutely amazing. So I'm going to be making a 1 gallon batch, which I know is fairly small. Most people brew probably anywhere around 5 gallons or more, but I like doing 1 gallon batches because most of the time it's just me drinking it. And second of all, it allows me to do more styles more frequently because I'm just producing less beer, and I like experimenting. So whilst I'm in this stage of just trying out new beers, I'll be brewing 1 gallon batches. So the recipe for this obviously then is for a 1 gallon batch of beer. If you want to brew more, obviously you'll need to scale that recipe up yourself. But the ingredients you need for this are 500 grams of Munich Malt and another 500 grams of Flaked Wheat. So that is your malt bill. Hopping for this wheat beer is really simple. All you need is about 10 grams of Hallertau hops. They're fairly traditional in wheat beers, and that's what gives them the bitterness and flavour that you'd come to expect. But the key ingredient for a wheat beer, especially if you want the German style Weissbier with that clove and banana flavour to it, is the yeast. So for this you want to use a specific, either the SafBrew wheat yeast or something similar, which basically is designed specifically for wheat beers that give you that distinctive clove, that banana, that spice taste to it, that everyone looks for in a wheat beer. So that's a really important ingredient, and again you need half a packet of that for a 1 gallon batch. I'll leave a link for the recipe for this and any of the kit that I've used in the description down below, and in the future I'll be uploading more videos as I learn and brew different styles and different techniques of beer. So if you're interested in keeping up with that, then please subscribe down below. So again, as with any brew, before we start, the first thing to do is sanitize anything and everything that will come in contact with our beer. Again, I'll leave a link down below to the sanitizer that I use. It'll be an Amazon link. And yeah, it's best to probably buy this in bulk if you're planning on brewing quite a lot into the future. You want to get a pot of sanitized water up and running and rinse everything through that you're going to be using for this brew. So the first step of brewing this German Weissbier is to heat 2 litres of water to 71 degrees Celsius. And once that's up to temperature, you're going to want to add both the 500 grams of the Munich Malt and 500 grams of the Flaked Wheat into that pot. So you've got 1 kilogram of grains going into this liquid, and give it a quick stir. You want to heat that malt at 63 to 68 degrees Celsius for that full 60 minutes. So put your thermometer in, obviously make sure you sanitize it first, and just keep an eye on the temperature. You probably won't need to keep it heated the whole time. Just add in heat here and there as and when the temperature drops, but you want to keep it in between that range for the full 60 minutes. Once those 60 minutes are up, again we're going to heat this up to 77 degrees Celsius very slowly whilst mashing that beer. So this is the mashing out process, and again we're just trying to extract all of the fermentable sugars out of that malt bill into the liquid, ready for the next step. So yeah, you want to heat it slowly to about 77 degrees and just give it a good stir and a good mash. Once that's done, you also want to heat a separate pot of water. So you want to heat about 4 litres of water separately in a pot up to 77 degrees Celsius. We're going to use that for the next step. And in the meantime, you can set up another separate pot with your strainer or your straining bag over the top, and you want to pour your grains into that straining bag and collect all the liquid underneath. So at this point you're effectively separating the grains from the liquid so that we end up with the wort, which is going to end up being our beer. So once you've done that initial transfer of the grains through the straining bag and you've collected the liquid underneath, you want to now take that new pot of water and pour that through too. Now the end goal here is to end up with about 4.75 litres of liquid at the end. So those two, the initial water that you put in that's evaporated and also been soaked up into the grains, plus that extra 4 litres together should give you about 4.75 hopefully at the end, but don't worry if it's a little bit more or less. So yeah, we want to put that water through those grains to collect more of those fermentable sugars, and you want to then collect that 4.75 litres and put it all back through the grain again at least one more time if possible. So now you should be left with 4.75 litres of effectively your beer, which is the wort. So we now need to boil this liquid itself. So put this straight back onto the heat and turn the temperature up, and you want to heat it up until it starts to foam, almost like boiling over the top. So that's called the hot break, and you want to get to that point, and then obviously you can reduce the heat a little bit, and then set a timer for 60 minutes, and we want to keep it at a slow steady boil for that full 60 minutes. Now once you've set that timer, you want to add half of the hops, so that's 5 grams of those Hallertau hops. So they're going to be used for bittering and give us that distinct bitter Weissbier taste. Once that's been boiling away for 45 minutes, you want to add another 2 grams of the hops. So that's another half really of what's left. And then again at 60 minutes, so once the boil is finished, we're going to add the final couple grams of hops as well. And again, they're just there for less for bittering towards the end and more for flavour and aroma. So at this point you should be left with about 3.8 litres of beer. So that boil, that 60 minutes of boiling will have evaporated some of that liquid away and should leave you with that gallon's worth of beer. And again, if you're brewing 5 gallons or more, obviously these numbers will vary, but that's what we're going for here for the 1 gallon batch. We should have reduced that beer down to about 3.8 litres. Now it's really important once that boil process is complete to cool this liquid down as quickly as possible. I do that by putting it in an ice bath in the sink, and we want to add the thermometer in and just keep an eye on that temperature and just make sure it drops down to about 18 to 20 degrees as quickly as possible. It's important we do that before we pitch the yeast, because adding yeast to really hot liquid will firstly just kill off some of those yeast cells, so they just won't be any good to us, and second of all it could also mean that you get random off flavours in the beer which are just no good for anybody. So in order to keep consistent with the style and to give the yeast the best chance of producing that good beer for us, we need to bring that temperature all the way down to about 18 to 20 degrees. Once that liquid has cooled down to about 18 or 20 degrees Celsius, it's now time to transfer it into the fermentation vessel. So for me, that is a 1 gallon demijohn. I'll leave a link for some options of that down below. At this point, it's probably a good thing for air to get in the beer. This is probably the only time in the brewing process that you would want oxygen to get into your beer. So in order to start that aeration process, which will effectively feed the yeast and give it some oxygen to feed on, I just pour this liquid straight into the demijohn through a funnel and also pass it through a small strainer to catch anything that's coming through, any of those hops or anything else that's left behind. Once you've successfully transferred all of that beer into the demijohn, it's now time to add the yeast. So this is a super simple process. So for me, the packet yeast that I had for a 1 gallon batch, I only needed to add about half of it. That should be more than enough, and the rest of it you can keep refrigerated or frozen ready for next time. So I just pitched that yeast into the top, sanitized one hand, put it on top of the demijohn and give it a good shake. And again, this shaking is to help with aeration, to help wake the yeast up and get it going really, and to make sure there's enough oxygen within the liquid to feed that yeast and get the process rolling. Now from my experience with the Brooklyn Brew Shop kits, I always start off for the first few days using a blow-off tube. So this is a simple mechanism that simply you put a piece of tubing into the top of the demijohn and then the other end of the tube goes into a small part of sanitizer. This just helps through the initial stages where the yeast is most active and it's producing a lot of carbon dioxide to make sure there's just enough space for it to move out. Most people say you're probably okay with the airlock. I just do this now basically out of habit because that's how I'm used to doing it, and it seems to work well for me. Then after a couple of days, I'll take that blow off tube out and I'll swap it for an airlock, where I'll just add a bit of sanitizer into the airlock and then pop that into the top of the demijohn. There's no dry hopping or anything like that to be done for this wheat beer. Everything is now complete and we're just leaving it aside for 2 weeks to ferment. Once that fermentation process is complete, you should be left with a beer that's around 5%. I recommend using a hydrometer to do this. So if you wanted to measure the alcohol content of the beer yourself, first of all you need to take the original gravity reading. So this is done, I would do this before you transfer into the demijohn. So transfer it into either the tube that comes with your hydrometer or into a glass that's big enough to support it. And the hydrometer tool just checks basically the gravity of the liquid. So this hydrometer, you would put that into the liquid, take a reading. It should be around 1.055 or something like that to start off with, and then transfer all that back into the demijohn and leave it. So once the 2 weeks of fermentation is complete, you want to check that gravity again, and it should be around 1.014, which will leave us at about 5.5 ABV. Obviously this is completely optional, but it's a good tool to have to check. First of all, to understand how much alcohol by volume you have in your beer, and secondly to also understand that the fermentation process is actually complete as well. So that is it for this beer really. It's as simple as that, to make a classic style beer that's, in my opinion, just really delicious. If you want to know more about the bottling process, I have a video for that I'll link down below to walk you through how to bottle 1 gallon of beer into some bottles. And this process will work for any style or any size of beer really if you're going into bottles. But yeah, you can find that video and that's linked down below. All that's left now really is for us to taste this beer, because I've got a bottle that I've already made here, just to give you a rough idea of what it looks like, and I can give you some feedback on the flavour too and how well the brew went. So I have a bottle of my German wheat beer here, so let's just pop the top and give it a go. Whoa, very lively. So it was fairly lively. As you can see, I've got it in the classic Erdinger Weissbier glass, as any good Weissbier should be drunk out of. Both tastes and smells just as you'd expect from a Weissbier. I mean, you've got the nice thick foamy head on the top. It's really fizzy, quite lively. You can see from the colour that it's fairly dark and opaque, which is what wheat beers normally look like. They tend not to be very clear, which is good. Yeah, it's got that clove spiciness to it, which has come from the yeast, and it also tastes. It tastes just like a very good Weissbier. It tastes probably more like a Franziskaner than an Erdinger, but overall, yeah, I'd say I'm really impressed with that. It's really good to have brewed something using like your own recipe rather than just using a kit and just following along. It's a good natural progression, and I think yeah, I'm looking forward to moving on to the Christmas ale, the winter spiced ale, which will be coming up in the next video. So if you want to see that, please hit subscribe down below. That's it for today really. Thanks very much for watching. If you enjoyed this, please hit like, and as I said, get subscribed, and I will see you in the next video. Cheers.